Yeah. Um, I think the thing that I would bring up that I don't think is good about our world is we are going to look to other people to help us learn. Since I began coaching, there are lots of people that I said, yes, I will do that, who didn't have the right reasons for why they were teaching what they were teaching. Like there's a lot of ego involved in saying, this is my way. I'm going to tell you, I think you should copy me. I don't have good reason for it. It's just what I think. I remember going to a national clinic here in the States one time. This very highly recognized coach talking about blocking, saying, this is the footwork we're going to do. We're going to say you're going to your right to block. What you're going to do is land on your right leg. And as you're landing from blocking, do an air step and begin to turn as you land so that you can transition quicker. I did it. Um, and then when I looked around the world and listened to the athletes that were becoming injured, um, I then went to a clinic several years later and the same coach saying, don't do this, saying, when you go to your right, you're going to have more injuries. Well, I'm glad that that person corrected themselves, but they were thinking without thinking when they were teaching what they were teaching. So as I went along, I mean, I always cared a lot about health, and my athletes, knock on wood, get lucky, didn't have a lot of injuries. But a couple of them did. One, a back injury. At 18, she blew out a disc in her lower back, L5S1. And another girl who was an amazing player, who they both were great players, who tore her ACL. Um, and I began to think more about why we ought to teach what we teach in terms of our skills and how we move and do things on the court. One of the first thoughts I had was, I've listened to coaches talk technically about everything. And in that point in my career, I hadn't heard one coach talk about how to land. All right. Well, the way we land is the reason for all the ACL tears that happen, or almost all of them happen. It's because of how we land. And so the girl that hurt her back, she had surgery, had discectomy, which at that age could ruin. I mean, that could be the end of your movement, certainly the end of an athlete. Her doctor was great. The surgery was good. When she had done her physical rehab and was going to be transitioning into playing volleyball again, she had two therapists that she worked with, physical therapists. And they said, let's go to the gym. You and this, her name is Addie, this player, are going to show us what you do in the sport. And we're going to talk to you about what she can do now. So we went through each of the skills. And when we'd show them the skill, they'd go, she can't do that anymore. And it's like, what? That we're talking passing, and that she's a great passer. Even though she was a middle, she passed, and she was a middle. She's a total rarity. They said she can't do that anymore. So we talked to them about why. And they said, because for her to live her life, she has to exist always in what we call neutral spine posture. And she rounded her back and stood with her back rounded when she passed. And they said, she can't do that. So it's like, okay, well, if we want people to play longer, to enjoy themselves and not hurt themselves in our sport, we better pay attention to that. We showed them each single skill, and they said, so we're talking serving. She's serving a floater. She tossed some balls. They got a little behind her, had to do this to hit it, to serve it. And they said, no, there's no way she can do that again. If she arches her back like that over and over and over again, she's just going to end up hurting herself again. And so to me, that said, okay, I got to rethink all that we do. And the reason that we're going to do it is because of what medicine says and what biomechanics says. So I ran into a biomechanist from Australia at the Australian Center of Sport, or I'm not sure if that's the official name. And Australia does a lot of great research in the athletic area. At least that's what I feel. And she came to Stanford and we were talking, and she said, about attacking. And she said, okay, what are the similarities in the sport, other sports to volleyball? Let's say volleyball attacking. And so everybody would talk about throwing in baseball, maybe throwing a football. And she said, no, biomechanically, the only thing that's similar to attacking um, is tennis serving and hitting a tennis overhit. Okay. So we talked about why. And she said, because if you're going to be a great volleyball attacker, you have to hit up at the ball. You have to be able to hit with spin or you can't hit with velocity. And to be able to hit with spin, you have to hit up at the ball. And yeah, there are adaptations of that with great athletes and how they change it. Generally, when you're teaching the sport, that has to be. And so then I began to think more about exactly what we say and how we copy things and learn from other situations and apply it to our sport. The only thing that throwing a baseball compares to is hitting a float serve. That's very similar because it's very horizontal. And the better you get at hitting exactly at the level that you want it, the lower you can serve it and the better you can be. So yeah, we could biomechanically compare those two and analyze it and teach people what we needed to teach them. So how far in front of them the contact point has to be rather than back here, over the shoulder versus over the head, which is very common. There's all these things. And so for me, the bad thing that happens is the reasons for why mentors, teachers, people tell us what to do is not based in science. And it should be always. So when the landing part, when you think about a female left side hitter that's right-handed, the ball's coming to them from the right side of their body on almost every set. We want them to reach to attack because you want as much altitude as you can get. And as soon as you start to reach, your shoulders tilt. And if your shoulders tilt, your hips are going to tilt. And if your hips tilt, that's going to encourage you to land on one leg, on your left leg, every single time. And so we're teaching them to land improperly because that's how we're teaching them to attack, right? That's a problem. It's like, well, do you want them to hit lower? No, I want them to reach, but I have to teach them to land. As soon as I teach them to jump, I have to teach them to land. So few people think they have time to do that or think that they should. We look at men as a counterpart. Men don't tear their ACL very often. They don't hurt. They may hurt their back as much. I just never read about that. There are reasons, females versus males. So maybe males learn to play the sport and land differently. I don't care. I dealt with the same gender my whole life. And as soon as we say, do this and reach, then we have to begin to teach them how to land. Otherwise, we're doing them a disservice and we're actually causing their injuries. And so now as the game has become more and more athletic with the speed of sets, blockers running and jumping off one leg and going to block to fill as well as they can because the sets are so low, we have to teach them how to land on 2 feet. But the game says we also have to teach them how to land on one. And we're in training weight room sessions with physical trainers. They better know that they have to spend time on one leg, strengthening and balancing. And in order for them not to be hurt, because the game is saying, we have to do this. And then we have to say, okay, now what does science say we should do to help keep them healthy? So that was a very long answer.
No, it's a long answer, but you did very well at explaining about that. It's easy to say, it has to be based on science, and they're not talking anymore. Then what do you mean? So it's really important that you thoughtfully explained like you just did.
Well, when you're as old as I am, and you've been coached for 50 years, the thing that can support different ways to think about it is stories. Stories that you have about this moment or this athlete or that athlete. And those two athletes what happened to them changed my whole coaching life. And I stopped listening to other coaches about how they did things, except strategically I'd listen. Physically, I didn't listen anymore. After a certain point, We just paid attention to biomechanics, which usually is the center. At the center of that is medicine, it's science.
Yeah.